We got a 2000 Corolla with a P0171. This car also has a P0420. And it's a 2000 Corolla. You know, there's a lot of guys that would say, well, you know, 420, we'll throw a cat and an O2 sensor on this thing and ship it. But this particular technician that did this doesn't operate that way, first of all. And second of all, I think in this case, that would have failed that repair process. So let's take a look. The DTCs and the freeze frame on this vehicle are showing us that the P0171 set, we're at a 51% load, operating temperature clearly, 2445 RPM, and we are adding 29.6% fuel. That's a bunch. Car's going 56 miles an hour. So this problem is stored under a load driving condition. One thing this technician does is he uses his mode 6 data to see if the PCM has reset that catalyst code. And in this mode 6 data, he sees that the status for the test of the catalyst monitor is complete. So he knows that the value of these PIDs down here are valid. What he's going to do is he's going to look at test ID 1, component ID 1, which in this case happens to be the catalyst deterioration in the catalyst monitor, and he's going to look at the values. And what this test does, what Mode 6 does, is it tells you the results of the last test that ran. The last time this catalyst was tested, the value of the test was 0.324. The minimum value is 0, and the maximum that value can be is 0.227. So it's out of range, and you know we would of course really love to know what those units mean. And so I consulted the Toyota service information, and you know what it said was that this is the catalyst deterioration level, and if it's 0.32 or more for 10 minutes, it sets the code. You know, we're 0.32 or more. It doesn't really tell me 0.32 of what, but at this point, you know, I honestly care, but I don't care enough to worry about it, because you know, if the value would have been between 0 and 0.227, the catalyst would have passed the last test. This catalyst did not. So the question is, are we ready to hang a cat on the car? And you know, this fella said, you know, I just something's bugging me here with this lead code. I can't see how the catalyst can really be doing its job. So what he does is looks at his fuel trim and immediately sees a trend where his long-term fuel trim increases with engine speed. So if you're idling right here, your long-term fuel trim is low. If you accelerate, the long-term fuel trim goes up. So there's some reason why our fuel trim is increasing under acceleration. I would also point out to you that if you're really thinking that it's got to be a fuel delivery problem, our long-term fuel trim trend, you know, started very early on in the vehicle acceleration. This is 60 miles an hour at the cursor, but just right off idle up in here, we have a super add of fuel trim. And, you know, in my experience, a fuel delivery issue really doesn't start going until you get up into the really high output areas. So based upon that, and based upon how much fun it is to check fuel pressure on a Toyota, I'm thinking that I'm going to go after the load sensor first. And that's what this fellow did. He went to the calculation. He found out what the calculation process was for this car. It's a mass airflow car. And then he went to the mass airflow sensor and did a snap test. In his opinion, it failed. Now, this marker down here represents 0 volts. And so this achieved somewhere around 2.5 volts at maximum RPM. But the real problem here is this initial gulp. It's just not there. Also, it's very slow to react. So in his opinion, the car needs a mass airflow sensor. New mass airflow sensor goes in. Another snap test gets done. And this time he is hitting pretty close to 3 volts peak. But more importantly, we've got a really good first gulp, and we've got these pulsations coming from the intake valves called reversion as the engine RPM is increasing. So now he's comfortable with this new mass airflow sensor. In fact, he's comfortable enough to clear the codes, drive the car until it reruns the catalyst monitor. And when it does, and we have a complete status for the catalyst monitor. We discover that we have a value of about 0.82, and that's well within the specification between 0 and 227. So he's comfortable that this catalyst will live another day and that the repair was complete with the mass airflow sensor. I don't think this car would have really reacted well to a new O2 and a cat. I think that the mass airflow sensor would have come back and turned on the light again.